My name is Ikram. I'm the Deputy Chief Magistrate. I'm a judge in the Magistrates' Courts, which means I deal with criminal cases, but I also deal with extradition at Westminster. I also support the Chief Magistrate in the work she does in relation to leading the district judges. I guess when I was growing up, I saw injustice all around me, or certainly what I thought was injustice. And I just wanted to do something about it. And I thought one of the ways to counter injustice was to be in the law. But I'm not going to say that it was a kind of straight route to becoming a lawyer, because I actually went to university to study engineering, which isn't kind of the thing you do if you want to become a lawyer. So I started reading for, as I say, an engineering degree, but then I changed halfway through. And when I looked back, I actually realized that it was something I had a real interest in, because, as I say, I was always watching the news, I was always debating, and it just felt the right thing for me to do as a career. Well, my first job was selling mobile phones, because I didn't go straight from Polytechnic to becoming a lawyer. So for a couple of years, I used to sell mobile phones when they were the size of suitcases, and they cost thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. I did that for a couple of years, and it was strange because I ended up getting headhunted for a company that was involved in cable TV, and they started to get me to look at their regulatory agreements, knowing that I had a law degree. And I just thought to myself, oh, great, I'm back to doing the law. And I hadn't actually done my bar exams. So I went back, and in those days, you could just turn up at Lincoln's Inn, pay £300 and do the bar exam. You didn't actually have to do a course. And seeing as I was pretty skint, I just paid the 300 quid and read for the bar exam. Passed on a resit, and my first job in the law, when I was properly qualified, was as a trainee legal advisor, giving advice to magistrates at Slough Magistrates Court. So how do judges arrive at decisions? Well, the first thing you've got to be clear on is, what are you being asked to decide? So once you're clear on what you're being asked to actually decide, you look at the evidence. Now, the evidence may or may not be true, and of course, one side or the other will say that the evidence is their way, and the other side will say, no, 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 it happened in a different way. And so what you have to do is you have to decide the facts, what actually happened. And then you have to look at the law and ask the question, so what? If those were the facts, is he guilty? What does the law say are the factual elements of the offence? So it's a mixture of making decisions about what happened, issues of fact, and deciding what the law is, issues of law. And in a lot of cases, what I'm doing is deciding if somebody's guilty of an offence. And that's how I make that decision. If I'm in extradition, which means I'm making decisions about whether people should be sent to other countries to face trial, sent to other countries to start their prison sentences, then I have to look at the law called the Extradition Act 2003 and see what sort of arguments they can put up to suggest that they should not be sent to that other country. And there are obligations on the issuing state, the country that's asking for them back. They also have obligations, and I have to see whether they've complied with their legal obligations. So it's about understanding the law again, and sometimes deciding what actually happened. So those are the real issues. What happened and what does the law say? What changes have I seen in the judiciary since I became a judge? Judges have got younger, but that might be because I'm getting older, maybe. Or maybe judges are getting younger. I think they are, actually. Judges are appointed at a much younger age than when I was appointed. They're also appointed definitely from a far wider range of backgrounds than when I was appointed. You know, in my time, you had to be a senior partner in a law firm, or you had to be a QC or a top barrister. These days, they're really asking the question, do you have the qualities to do the job? So where you come from matters less. It's more about what you can offer and what you can do. And I suppose the other thing that I have seen changing is more women judges. And look, you know, I'm not white. I'm not from a posh background. You know, my mum worked packing wagon wheels, which some of you might know what wagon wheels are, maybe you don't. So, you know, people are from a far wider range of backgrounds. They're not all the same. They're not all posh from the posh universities. I think that's really important. And it's, you know what, it's really good to see that the people who deserve to be there are getting appointed. And it doesn't really matter where you actually come from. That's a big difference in attitude. What do judges do when they're not in the courtroom? Well, I have to say I spend quite a lot of my time writing, because a lot of my decisions are given in writing, so I have to explain what I heard, what I concluded, and why I made the decision that I did, so that the world can understand. So a lot of the times I'm actually behind the scenes. I also am a tutor at the Judicial College, and that involves sitting with judges and judges reflecting on their own learning. And so I facilitate their learning. I often writing exercises. Those are not physical exercises, these are written legal things. And you know, judges sit down and wonder what the answers are, and they share their thoughts, and I make that happen. So there is some sort of, there's elements of teaching, and I've been doing the job now for 11 years full time, and I hope that I can share some of my experiences with other judges. The other thing I do is I support the Chief Magistrate in her leadership role. And she leads about 200, maybe 230, 240 judges across the country, and all sorts of issues arising, especially during COVID. So often it's supporting my colleagues and helping them do their job. So lots of things. I would say I'm only really in court, visible in court, about half my working week. My parents came to England in the early 1960s, and neither of them went to school. So it's not a case of they didn't go to uni. I mean, they didn't even go to school. I was born in Slough, but my mum today doesn't really speak English. So I kind of felt like an outsider. And I wasn't really part of the sort of university crowd, because nobody in my family was really part of that. So, you know, one of the things you've really got to deal with is whether you think you're going to fit in and whether they're looking for people like you. But what my dad has done is really instilled the importance of education in me. And you know, for lots of kids who are sons and daughters of immigrants, that's the way to break into a successful world. So that's something which I took on board. I went to university. I didn't see many Asian lawyers of my background when I joined my law firm. That, I have to say, has changed a lot over the years, but I certainly didn't see that, and I have to say I used it as a bit of an advantage. You know, sometimes difference can actually work in your favour. a lot of my clients would say, you know, you get it, you understand where we're coming from. And I had really good rapport with clients because they could relate to me. And I really did understand some of the challenges they had. And so, you know, hurdles, differences sometimes become an advantage. And I think it hasn't held me back. Whether it's been always a major advantage, well, I don't know. But it's something you can use. And it's something actually they need. The legal profession needs people who think differently. They need different sorts of solutions. The public want to see people who look like them. Sometimes they want to see people who come from their social class. They don't always want to see a small, sort of narrow group making the decisions. And I think that has given me insights which are useful. And the judiciary and the legal profession are looking for people who add value, who can bring something to the institutions. So I don't see them as hurdles, really. I see them as differences, and I see differences can be positive. What advice would I give somebody who wants to become a judge? Well, the first thing is, don't think you can't do it. I think we set so many of our own barriers. A lot of us can sometimes, well, many of us often think, no, they don't want people like me. They want people like them or him or her. So I think the first thing is you've got to really not only want the job, because it's really competitive, and I'll come back to that in a moment, but don't hold yourself back. Have a go. Becoming a judge is a competitive process, and you've got to understand how you get there. And so talking to other judges is really important. I think I would certainly look to do some shadowing. And there are all sorts of schemes which judges have in place for mentoring and shadowing. Because just getting insights into you know, what the qualities are of a judge, really understanding how judges make decisions, understanding what the job really is like, is going to help you not only decide whether it's for you, but it will also help you in the process of applying. And the other thing is to understand what the Independent Judicial Appointments Commission are looking for, because they make recommendations on becoming a judge. And you've really got to understand what they're looking for, understand something called the competencies, because they are the characteristics and the skills people have that they're looking for. And you've got to be able to tick the boxes. You've got to be able to evidence that you meet those competencies. So you've got to really work at it, and you've got to spend some time putting together the evidence that you do tick the boxes. So there's planning. It's not something you would think about doing overnight. I think it takes time to put together everything you need to put together. But you know what? If people like me can tick those boxes, there's no reason why anyone else can't. So go for it. One of the roles I have within the judiciary is I'm the Deputy Lead Diversity and Community Relations Judge. And a lot of energy is going into making us, the judges, more diverse. And certainly when I started, and I'm old now, I started as a part-time judge in 2003. I can tell you that there weren't many people like me from Slough as judges. And I didn't go to a posh place. I went to Wolverhampton Polytechnic, and I can't imagine there were any other judges from Wolverhampton Polytechnic at the time. You know, diversity comes in lots of different guises. You know, it's not just about the colour of your skin. It can be as much about where you come from and the type of education you've got. And I didn't see as much of it in those days. And I also have to say, I don't remember anyone using words like diversity in 2000. It kind of changed after I became a part-time judge, where people started talking about the value of getting people from different backgrounds, and also sometimes a feeling amongst some that they weren't getting a look in. And if you don't give everyone a look in, you're not getting the best people, because you're ignoring a lot of talent which is out there. But it shouldn't be out there. It should be inside your organization. And so a lot of energy has gone into diversity. And, certainly in terms of gender equality, there are so many more women judges than there were before, right up to President of the Supreme Court, right to the top. It's a slow start, it's not going to happen overnight, but seriously progressive progress. I think there are a lot more judges from different social backgrounds now, and the university backgrounds of a lot of us. I didn't even go to university, I went to a polytechnic. It is completely different, and so we're from a wider range of backgrounds. We've got a lot more solicitors involved. There's more work to do. I wasn't a practicing barrister for very long. I was a barrister, but I spent much of my career as practicing as a solicitor. And so there's a lot more of us. Then there's issues of ethnic diversity. Now, there is a difference. There's a massive difference since I started. You've got judges like Lord Justice Rabinder Singh now on the Court of Appeal. You've got several High Court judges. What I will say is there's more work to be done on that. I don't think the progress has been as fast as I would have liked. The statistics are showing improvements, but there's more work to be done on that front. But these things are complex, and it's really easy to look at statistics and draw what sometimes I think are simplistic conclusions. The fact is that you've got to look through the whole of people's careers. You've got to look at, how diversity feeds through the legal profession, because you've got to be a lawyer first before you're a judge. So, you've got to start asking all sorts of other questions about, what's the diversity in the legal profession? Can your class hold you back to become a partner in a law firm? Can your gender hold you back to become a QC? Because all these things kind of rub in and influence who it is that becomes a judge. So the answers are not easy, but is there a difference? Yes. I have been to many places across the world. I do some teaching across the world, and I'll tell you one thing. If you were to ask most people across the world, what is the model of an excellence in terms of judges in the judiciary, they'd say it's the English legal system. And central to that English legal system is the judges. And it's the robust independence of the judges, independence from government, from political influence, applying the law and not being sidetracked or influenced by other considerations, that create that notion of justice. And judges have to be allowed free rein to make decisions within the law, but away from influence. And, the world is a complex place now. You listen to the news every day, you hear political stories, and and judges having to make decisions which touch on politics. But it's that independence, it's the fact that we don't get involved in the politics that makes us able and gives us the space to actually make just decisions. It's not my function to ask myself the question, is this law wrong or right? It is the law, it's my job to apply it. But central is this core idea that you apply the law and you do it on the facts that are presented to you. Let me talk to you about misconceptions about judges. If you were to walk down the street, no one would say, look, there's a judge. If I'm wearing a t-shirt and jeans, and I often am, believe me, no one's thinking I look like a judge. So the first misconception is, who are the judges? We're not all white, we're not all old men. And I think there's another second real misconception about how we arrive at decisions. You know, some people think we are instruments of government, or somehow we make what the government wants happen. And that's a complete misconception. Judges are independent. They're independent of the politicians. They're independent of the state. And so we do what we think is right in accordance with law. Parliament makes the law, we interpret it, and we apply it. So I think sometimes, you know, people just don't really understand where we fit in and our role within sort of the idea of the state. I think those are the two biggest misconceptions. I think once upon a time, judges, more so than today, did what they thought was right as individuals. But that's changed quite some time ago. We now have something called the Sentencing Council and guidelines. And the guidelines tell all judges the general approach they should take. That doesn't mean judges don't make their own decision in a particular case, but they create a degree of consistency and a framework for decision making. So in every single case, I'm looking at the Sentencing Council and their guidelines on sentencing, but I apply it to the defendant and I apply it to his or her circumstances for the offence they have committed, which means, you know, every case there's a slightly different sentence. I've always thought within the Sentencing Council guidelines, there's always space for compassion and mercy. The range of sentences, the range of offences I deal with are going to be from people who are really, really bad to people who have crossed the line in maybe ways they never expected or ways they never intended. And I think there's a role also for mercy and, yeah, you broke the law, but, you know, on this occasion, I'm going to give you a chance. And I'd like to think that if I were in their shoes, even if I didn't always agree with the sentence, I would always want that person to think they had a fair hearing and a fair go. People take for granted in this country the fact that society kind of works, and we do have sets of rules, and generally speaking, people follow those rules. There is a set of laws, and society accepts they will follow them. And that doesn't mean everyone, it means everyone. It means that nobody's above the law. And that's really, really important. If you start thinking about notions of justice, it's not justice that depending on who you are, you comply with the law and you get away with it if you don't. We have a system which actually works. It doesn't matter who you are. You come before the courts, you'll be treated equally. And there is a set of laws which applies to everyone. And that is important because that is fairness, that is justice.